Brother Mahmood, thank you very much for joining us on the show, for taking out time. There's an important meeting going on in Egypt. We want details on that. Then we can take it from there.
Yes, of course. So the first round, what's being labeled as a first round, because to be honest with you, we haven't had a clarification initially that there are going to be rounds. Donald Trump sold this idea of an agreement in Gaza or this peace plan as something that either you accept or leave, and then automatically is going to be implemented within 72 hours. At the time, we said that that's not very likely to happen, and this what's happening now is a translation of the fact that, well, it can't really happen in 72 hours. So then now they're confirming that this is the first round of negotiations. So the Israeli delegation attended, the senior Hamas delegation attended in the Palestinian side. After, of course, Hamas, they negotiate on behalf of the Palestinian resistance factions. So they speak on their behalf because they have consensus amongst them. And that's very important to note. The Israeli delegation, on the other hand, they sent a senior delegation. This delegation, however, is primarily focused on the security arrangements on the ground. The reports are talking about positive first day. The Qatari delegation said that there is no comment on optimism or pessimism or it being, going the right direction or not. We're just simply negotiating because on the ground there are severe breaches. From an Israeli side, they are constantly targeting Gaza still, so the genocide is still going. We've seen some of the most horrific scenes in the past several days with children being killed, butchered, some of them beheaded in Gaza. That's with Donald Trump's request for Israel to stop all of the aggression and the Israeli army confirming that they went into a defensive mechanism in Gaza rather than continue with the ground operation. But in effect, what that did to them is it saved them face because their ground troops are incapable, number one, and they don't have what it takes to fight the resistance in Gaza, and continue, of course, with their barbarity from the Air Force or airstrikes or drones or whatever they do against the civilian population. From a Hamas perspective, they told them in the meetings that it's not going to be possible to release the people when Israel is constantly attacking. So you can tell here from the beginning that the Israeli side isn't really sincere nor genuine in their intentions to actually reach a ceasefire. They're doing everything possible to make it impossible and then talk about the Palestinian side breaching. And the reason I'm mentioning it here is because, of course, the propaganda machine isn't going to tell you that. They're not going to be talking about Israel bombing innocent civilians. And they'll tell you later on, oh, it's Hamas actually not wanting to reach a deal. Although it was Benjamin Netanyahu who constantly broke ceasefires, restarted the genocide, and also added sticks to the wheels and made impossible demands for the delegation, as confirmed by the delegation itself. There were very many leaks from the Israeli delegation, by the way, that Netanyahu is making it impossible to reach a deal. Don't forget that after 1.5 months into the genocide, there was a ceasefire. That was supposed to be the first step in three phases and end the war completely. It was Netanyahu, by the signature of the then defense minister or genocide minister, also wanted war criminal, to break the ceasefire and restore the war. So we have a pattern here. All of that with full backing and complicity from the American administration. Now, despite that, and despite the fact that this move now is led to a large extent by Donald Trump's desire to have a Nobel Peace Prize, I don't know how, I mean, it's going to be a huge joke if he does, to be honest with you. But hey, there were other war criminals who got Nobel Peace Prizes, whether confirmed by the ICC or ICJ or not. And he wants something tangible to happen on the ground. That's not going to be the case because it is, again, impossible. Even with the maps that Donald Trump published, that prove that Israel is going to be retreating to a certain position in Gaza as an initial phase, that those are not going to be the lines agreeable by the Palestinian side, most likely, because the Palestinians will not be releasing, the Palestinian resistance will not be releasing the prisoners of war, all of them, all at once, so long as there are no assurances on the ground. Now, from an Israeli perspective, Israeli media is preparing the public opinion that there may be certain concessions, such as withdrawal from Gaza. I mean, full withdrawal, even beyond this security parameter that they're talking about. Having guarantees that will tie Israel's hands, and also not disarming the Palestinian resistance at the time, for the meantime, as in it's going to be a progress. The question is, how can Netanyahu combine that with his coalition that he is hell-bent on, by the way? I'm not sure why he's so hell-bent on this coalition when he was also provided with a safety net from the opposition to continue. It could either do with the fact that Netanyahu doesn't want very early elections, because assuming the war is going to end, by the way, this genocide, there are going to be immediate calls for early elections in Israel. That is assuming Netanyahu probably doesn't want this early election now. Although we already heard about talks of him receiving a safety net for a certain period of time, whether sufficient or insufficient, and also deals with him and the state to do with an amnesty or a plea deal where Benjamin Netanyahu would not be chased after by the Israeli courts. So all of the criminal charges against him would be dropped, and he would potentially still be in the political life. He's going to continue and potentially even become the prime minister yet again as a wanted war criminal. All of these developments are, it's very important to combine all of them together to understand where things are going. So whilst we do have a development on the ground that some people are calling serious, and there is a genuine desire to end the suffering of the Palestinians in Gaza, but not at any cost, of course, because if the costs would be the erasure of the Palestinian case and no guarantee that another genocide is going to take place tomorrow, whether they're armed or unarmed, that's going to be counterproductive. Because we saw what happened with a disarmed Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, armed with only things that they can fight the Palestinian side with. Then we have certain developments on the ground as well that prove that the region is actually headed towards escalation. How much is that going to be tied with Gaza, or is Benjamin Netanyahu going to decide on an escalation following a report of a ceasefire in Gaza? That's a separate story, but there are preparations. And those preparations aren't just coming from Israel, they're coming from the United States. The United States is conducting moves and transporting arms and military machinery to Europe and the West Asian region or the Middle East, similar to what they've done before the attack on Iran. All of that is indicating that simultaneously with these talks, there are intense preparations. Also, they reintroduced these sanctions against Iran. Iran, from its part, said then, well, I'm not talking to you anymore. It's counterproductive to talk with the United States with these hostile measures being taken against us. Donald Trump just made a statement saying that if Iran's nuclear matter is not dealt with, then we will take care of it. What does he mean by taking care of it? Is he preparing for an actual bigger war, regardless of the facts? Because it doesn't really make sense, of course. I was just speaking about this. From a general perspective, from a global perspective, it doesn't make any sense. What makes sense is a peaceful resolution and diplomacy and equal rights, by the way, especially for the Palestinian people. That would be what secures trade, what secures people's lives, reduces the risk of an escalation. But clearly we're talking about illogical players here, to say the least. hostile, illogical players, some of them on the verge of psychopathy because they are literally providing a cover for Benjamin Netanyahu. So there is no real assurance here where things would go.
Brother Mahmoud, I was still trying to wrap my head around the distrust that Israel created when they attacked Qatar. How is Hamas coping with? Uh, how do we know that these guys won't attack the meeting?
Well, that's a very interesting question. Actually, and I was also talking about this in a recent video. Egypt took severe measures to secure the Hamas delegation going to the negotiations. Number one, they didn't disclose the meeting place. Some reports said Sharm el-Sheikh, some reports said Cairo. Then they took severe measures, GPS jamming, security, military moves to hide the whereabouts of the Palestinian delegation because we're talking about the same people who Israel just tried to assassinate several weeks back. Khalil al-Hayya and Zahir Jabarin. Both of them were in the meeting that Israel bombed. Egypt reportedly thwarted an Israeli assassination attempt recently as well, as in it didn't reach the level of execution. Although the calculations, by the way, of assassinating a figure in Egypt is much different to assassinating a figure in Qatar. You're talking about a border country with the strongest army next to Israel, capable of providing a real threat, let alone that the whole of the Egyptian population hates Israel, regardless of the peace treaty that their government had after the 1973 war when they regained back their territories. So it's not about trust. And politics isn't about trust. And usually, when you want to have deals, you don't just speak with your friends. You, of course, speak with your enemies or mediators to speak with your enemies. As a matter of fact, Israel, believe it or not, suggested that they have face to face meetings with Hamas. Do you know that? It was the Hamas side that refused. Said, we're not going to sit with them on the same table. So what we in essence have are two rooms in that building where the meeting is taking place. The Hamas delegation on one hand, and the resistance, of course, if some of them are gonna participate, if it's mostly the leadership, the political bureau leadership. On the other hand, the Israeli delegation and the mediators will move between both of them. And again, it isn't about trust. There is no trust. There are efforts, and those efforts would be built on mutual interests and also calculated on the country's desire to reach a settlement. And how is that usually calculated? They calculated based on whether the continuation of the genocide, and I'm talking primarily about the Israeli and American side too, although the United States president, he has the power to really put his foot down, which he clearly hasn't so far. He's done things to kind of, have a show, but nothing serious. Otherwise, he can tomorrow tell Israel that you're done. Mhm. Some reports said that he told Netanyahu, "We won't be with you anymore if you don't come and talk." So again, it could be a whole stunt and for his own interest. But in the greater scheme of things, if they calculate that it isn't necessarily too much of a loss to continue down the genocide, then they may. Israel backed by the United States. If they feel like we have exhausted it, then no, they would want to reach a settlement. The absurd thing about all of this is that if we want to take Israel's perspective, from an Israeli perspective, it was too late 2 years ago already. It was way too late back then. When they started the genocide, many people who were on the Israeli camp switched sides within 2 to 3 weeks. Because when Israel was crying about the acts that they've done to themselves on October the 7th, apart from the military campaign of the resistance on 7th of October, the killing of Israelis, the mass murders, clear with evidence and confirmations from Israel. They showed the whole world that, oh, well, if you're doing that to the Palestinians, then why are you judging the Palestinians for what they've done to you militarily? Not even against the civilians. They're incomparable with regards to the civilians, by the way. However, a decision has been made at the time by Netanyahu, and that decision was clearly supported by the United States and the Western establishment. Because think about it for a second. Let's weigh out the pros and cons. Okay? Israel militarily, even before they entered their ground forces into the Gaza Strip, already cut their ground troops by 2/3. So they're a third of what they used to be 2 decades ago. So they weren't really that capable for ground battles. They were only relying on the snap wars that they conduct with the Air Force. Then their army has no morale whatsoever to fight. Over 60% refuse conscription. Many of them flee the battle anyway. Their arms situation isn't great. They're clearly losing more and more arms. More countries are imposing an embargo on them too. Even with the arms coming from the United States, it's like there is no manufacturing to supply ratio that is sufficient for Israel even. Do you understand? They had a problem in getting uh, parts for some of their tanks. They are totally demoralized by everything that happened in Gaza. We see them fleeing the resistance attacks, resistance walking barefoot, with bare feet, in Gaza fighting, an army equipped with everything, a terror army equipped with most of the advanced things that they need. So that's not helping them either. And the biggest thing, this is the biggest thing, Israel's image all across the world has been tarnished forever. If they went through October the 7th, and even with the propaganda, because there are October the 7th that were real and elements that were propaganda. Real, the resistance conducted an attack. They took down the whole Gaza division in about 30 to 45 minutes. They humiliated this supposedly most advanced division, and they captured prisoners of war. The propaganda is, well, the Israeli civilians who died in mass were mostly killed by Israel. Even with the propaganda videos that they published, we can clearly see that the resistance didn't have an intention of killing innocent, uninvolved civilians. Therefore, those statements coming from Israeli pilots who were ordered to shoot at everyone going back to Gaza, whether Israeli or not, Israeli residents of Ra'im, kibbutzes, and Nir Oz, confirming that it was Israeli fire killing the Israelis, the Nova Festival, and the mass killings, and the burnt down cars in that region. These weren't Palestinian weapons. The tanks that were roaming around, all of that. But Israel, despite the fact that it's not going to be recovering from its image, and if they did, what I wanted to say is if they did at the time have a ceasefire, they could have potentially kept the public opinion on their side and portrayed themselves as victims of an attack. Assuming you're ignorant about the case of Palestine, you don't know anything and you haven't contextualized anything. They went the opposite way, and we are where we are now. Israel's image, Israel's legitimacy, the validity. There is no validation for their existence. Even amongst the Jewish communities all across the world, more and more people are denouncing Israel. So, despite all of that, and that's the different thing about what's happening today, is that despite all of that, they are continuing and are trying to fight this reality against them with even more propaganda. These things that they do, by the way, are proof that you're talking about psychopaths, insane people, that they're really not thinking straight. Netanyahu especially. These people have psychopathic traits, detached from reality, no empathy to anything around you or even your own people, assuming that you can do everything you want with money and force rather than actual diplomacy, which is both cheaper and more straightforward, by the way. The whole thing is insane. Because think about it this way: had Israel agreed to a solution without any weapons or without anything of the sort, that would guarantee the rights of the Palestinian people, equal rights between the Jordan River to the sea, would we be in this position? We wouldn't be in this position. But they are insisting on this genocide. They are insisting on continuing. And despite the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu came to the negotiating table now, there is no guarantee whatsoever that it's going to succeed. Simply judging by Israel's totally illogical measures, thinking about it from even outside of Palestine, like from a global perspective, from a geopolitical perspective, from a political perspective, from a geographical, financial, everything perspective. They're not thinking straight. And that shows that these people don't have a problem with continuing. As a matter of fact, they would probably want to escalate, especially now with more threats about another attack on Iran. Therefore, it's very difficult to judge what's going to come in the next few weeks. We can assume, we can analyze, we can bring the people and the viewers all of the arguments to support the notion that no, there might be a de-escalation. But on the other hand, there are many other indications that show actually it's the contrary, and things will be escalating after this. And no matter how much, again, we want what's good for the people of Gaza, which would be a ceasefire and a long-term peaceful solution that would stop this barbaric genocide against them and protecting their rights moving forward.
How is President Trump taking this? Because he was the man who seems to be in a great hurry because of his Nobel Peace Prize, and the
Mm.
meetings being sliced up into different parts, and the peace talks, and these things are seem to be lingering on slowly. How is Trump coping with all this?
Donald Trump, as a president in politics, he did something ever since he went into politics, especially in his recent term, that he tries to use to his advantage. I'm not sure if he views this as a like a strategic power card or something, but Donald Trump tries to be unpredictable and tries to use his unpredictability for his own interest. We can see that happening. So initially, Donald Trump came as the prophet of peace, almost selling himself as the prophet of peace in the world. All of a sudden, he started to talk about the gates of hell against the children and women of Gaza. Then reports said, and he applied pressure through Steve Witkoff to force Netanyahu into agreement, which happened, but then later Israel went out from. Then constantly bad-mouthing the Palestinian side. Now he changed his tone to say that, oh no, actually Hamas are open for it. He reposted a statement of theirs that confirmed that there's a genocide in Gaza. Now he's saying Hamas, yeah, they're fine, with what's happening, in a way to apply pressure on Netanyahu to accept the deal. All for the sake of what? Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump's main aim and interest is Donald Trump. He is very concerned and obsessed about his image, about how he is perceived. He gets very offended with minimal criticism, even if it's coming from national media in the United States. That is establishment backed anyway. And he acts very irrationally. Saying all of that, he is very heavily influenced, if not, let alone controlled by the Zionist and Israeli lobby in the United States. There's a lot of money behind Donald Trump. That's not to say that they're going to be all aligned, by the way, because even if you want to talk about the Zionist lobby, they don't all share the same vision about everything. This is what we need to understand. So not all of them necessarily agree with Netanyahu, but they agree with Israel. They don't have a problem with apartheid or genocide, but maybe not totally Netanyahu. But Netanyahu put them in a very difficult position where he's like testing their loyalty almost for Israel, which is something that they wanted to export to their mouthpieces in the right wing or the so-called right wing in the United States. So we can't really trust what Donald Trump says. Number one, he has a proven track record of backtracking and having U-turns, many 180s. He is unreliable. He doesn't have any integrity. And he is also a pathological liar. So the unfortunate reality is the power is in the hands of these people. And the other powers, if we want to talk about certain European countries, even some in the Arab and Muslim world, they're almost stooges to this power controlling everything. Now, although we're seeing a shift now, a slow shift towards multipolarity, it's taking time. It's taking time, and it's not necessarily putting a limit or a block to what Israel is doing in Gaza or the American support for it. Like some people were immediately after Donald Trump came up with this statement that was, of course, amended by Netanyahu, started to say that, it's the Arab states' influence on Donald Trump. We do understand that the Arab and Muslim states, they have a level of influence on the American president and the administration. But if we equate that to the influence of Israel and the Israeli lobby, would they be at the same level? They wouldn't be at the same level. Saying that, he did manage to do certain developments that led to ceasefires before. He managed to apply certain pressure before, but all of that eventually collapsed. So the harsh reality is we are in the realm of unknown and uncertainty. And although, most of the viewers would want certainty on this matter, the unfortunate thing is that we can't provide them with the certainty on this. Because where there are indications that things are headed towards a peaceful solution, there are exactly the opposite indications, on the other hand, to prove otherwise.